Hello and welcome to this edition of Capitol Dateline Online. I'm your host, Brad Swanson. We're coming to you just a few blocks from the Capitol at the Florida Cable Telecommunications Association's headquarters. We're joined once again by the News Service of Florida's executive editor, Jim Saunders, to tell us about what's coming up in Tallahassee, what's happened. So Jim, welcome.
Hey.
All right, so we're here just after Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s holiday. Always a great time to reflect on Florida's diversity and where we're going in the future. But now we're here to talk about the Capitol.
And it was a great weekend.
It was a great weekend as well. Apparently some mattress sales as well. You know, there's no way to
Don't know about that.
Celebrate the leaders in our world by mattress sales. So, all right, but here we're talking about Tallahassee. So, big news on both the Democrat and the Republican fronts and their leadership. They had an election. Who won? What's the story?
Yeah, I mean, the leadership of both parties is set for the next election cycle, so we go from here.
Okay.
Stephen Patel won the Democratic chairmanship. He's a developer from Miami-Dade County and a prominent Democratic fundraiser. The Democratic contest had 5 candidates seeking to become chair. Allison Tant didn't run for another term. He won fairly handily. The process was a little messy, but he wound up on the back end winning it.
Well, let me ask you a question there, because you had Dwight Bullard in the mix there, who is typically a force to be reckoned with. How did how did the politics shake out in that? I mean, ultimately they just had their vote.
Well, it looked like over time, a lot of the leaders of the party started lining up behind Patel.
Okay.
Bill Nelson came in behind him. There were some other congressmen. And he, was able to consolidate his support over time. Again, like you indicated, Dwight Bullard was a candidate. Democratic Party, there's different factions quite often.
Right.
But, they really need to unify if they're going to have a successful 2018 cycle. I mean, there's a governor's race on the ballot. That's the big one. But there's a U.S. Senate race on the ballot. And they have not had much success lately. So, they've got to do a turnaround plan to get together. And he appeared to at least have the support of the leaders of the party. Now it's going to be his mission to go out there and try to unify the rest of the party. Not an easy thing to do always with Democrats, both geographically as well as policy.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at their registration, though, they far outnumber Republicans and for sure the no-party affiliates. So, if he can get that party, organized and moving in a direction, I mean, they are a force to be reckoned with, but will he wake up the sleeping giant?
Well, I think the geographically, a lot of there's a question in my mind, at least. I mean, he's a South Florida guy, and they do pretty well in South Florida, but it's in North Florida and some of these other areas of the state where they really did not do well this election cycle. Can he reach out beyond the progressive base in South Florida and pull in enough votes from other areas?
The conservative rural Democrats.
Conservative rural Democrats, but there's also they need to motivate black voters in a lot of the urban areas and rural areas, but you need to be able to go into Jacksonville and turn out large numbers of black voters, for instance.
Right.
They need to figure out how to do that in advance of 2018 because, again, the Republicans are going to be loaded with money and they have a good organization, and it's going to be a challenge for Democrats to come in and win that.
Let's talk about the Republicans for a second. So they had an election too. As much controversy and factions, or what was the story over there?
Well, Blaise Ngolia, who's a state representative from Spring Hill, he won re-election as the chairman. There was some controversy. Christian Ziegler, who's a committee man, a party committee man from Sarasota County, challenged Ngolia. In the end, Ngolia won by a pretty comfortable margin. I do think, you look back at this past election cycle, Republicans had a lot of success.
Yeah.
And, I think Ngolia could go out there and say, why make a change at this point? We did well during this cycle. So, there's been controversy with the governor, whether he's been supportive of the party, been tied in with the party, but I'm not sure it really mattered in this case, in this chairman's race. Now, how it goes forward over the next 2 years, I think it's too early to see or too early to tell.
Right.
But I think Ngolia had a story to tell.
All right. So the Republicans didn't gamble with new leadership. but the legislature is now thinking about moving on and expanding gambling. Let's turn our focus back to the legislature. There's your segue for the day. Senator Galvano pushed out his gambling package, and that's the first salvo. What's happening there?
Well, Senator Galvano laid a 112-page bill on the table on Thursday, so it is the first opening shot in the gambling issue this year. Mm-hmm. We've known for months that gambling might be an issue during this upcoming session, partly because the Governor Scott's administration, as well as legislative leaders, including Galvano, Jose Felix Diaz in the House, they've been negotiating with the Seminole Tribe, talking to the Seminole Tribe, trying to come up with a new gambling agreement with the tribe in which the tribe essentially would pay the state a certain amount of money, and the state would give the tribe exclusive rights to offer certain gambling games. So we knew this was out there, that this issue was out there. Galvano's bill is sort of interesting, though, because it doesn't really address the Seminole Compact much. It is more focused on the rest of the gambling industry in Florida, pari-mutuels primarily, but it has all sorts of, it's a kitchen sink kind of bill, has all sorts of things, and his approach is basically, as we understand it, is to lay this on the table as a first step, and then let everybody know what's out there, and then try to work it out with the Seminoles.
Well, how receptive is the House to a bill like this?
At this point, we're not sure, but if you just look at the past experience, the House has been pretty reluctant to expand gambling. So if some of these things that Galvano is proposing are to go into effect, there's probably going to have to be some reductions in other forms of gambling, or some sort of trade-offs, if you will. Right. I mean, he's talking about things like allowing slot machines at pari-mutuels in, I believe it's 8 counties of the state, where there are where referendums have been approved to allow slot machines. Now that's a big change in gambling policy in the state.
Right.
There's litigation about it right now, or questions about it right now. But that's a big change. Another one, which is very high profile in the gambling industry, has been for years, would allow what they call decoupling, which is kind of gambling jargon, but essentially greyhound tracks and some horse tracks would not have to run live races anymore. They could just operate card rooms and in some cases slot machines without running live races. Really, it's been a controversial issue for years. It's been come up again and again for years because part of the premise behind pari-mutuels in this state, going back decades and decades, was that they would run live races. So it sort of would change the whole mission, if you will, of the original picture of the industry and allow them to become essentially card rooms. Right. I mean, that's where pari-mutuels are making money these days. It's not on running live races.
Yeah, the races are loss leaders, if you will, and they're required by a law in order to operate the rest of the facility. So the opponents of this will say, any expansion of gambling hurts Florida's #1 portion of our economy, which is the tourism industry. Those that are in the gaming and gambling world will argue that we already have gaming and gambling. Do you see no casinos and the business community rallying on this one, or is this still in its infancy at this point?
Well, I had an interesting conversation last week with Mark Wilson, who's the president and CEO of the Florida Chamber. And he was telling me that they have always been opposed to what they call Las Vegas style casino gambling. Like there's been proposals over the years to allow big casinos in Miami, South Florida, those sorts of areas, and he said they're adamantly opposed to that. But it sounded like they may be more open to some of these other ideas. For instance, he spoke pretty positively about reaching a deal with the tribe, the Seminole Tribe, which at least in certain ways, would expand the games that could be offered at the tribal casinos. So I think it's a little bit more nuanced for a lot of organizations than just yes, no. I do think No Casinos has pretty much laid down a marker for years that it doesn't want any expanded gambling. Yeah. And they have a proposed constitutional amendment that would make it harder to expand gambling. Yeah. It's not on the ballot yet, but it could be in 2018. So there's a lot of moving parts to this issue, and I think one thing to keep in the back of the mind is a lot of people want to deal with the Seminole tribe.
Right.
And if you're going to have a deal with the Seminole tribe, you probably need to make some changes in the parimutuel industry, or else the parimutuels can make it very difficult politically to get anything through.
Well, and in the past, the parimutuels have really typically not been seen as a united front within that space. This bill looks like it's potentially a united front, at least from Senator Galvano's bill that he filed in leadership.
Well, I'm not sure. It's always hard to ever declare anything in the parimutuel industry a united front. I mean, because there's like so many different players and so many different interests there. But he does give a lot of, this bill would give a lot of things to a lot of different people and try to make them happy.
Right.
You know, but how much of that the Seminoles would accept,
Sure.
You know, is the other question. I mean, if you put slot machines at a parimutuel in Palm Beach County, that may cut into what the Seminoles are able to offer at their facilities in South Florida. So, you know, there's a lot of moving parts. I'm just using that example because I don't know yet whether that's going to be an issue. But that's the kind of thing that I think you got to think through.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because the Seminoles, you know, will make the argument, hey, we're a sovereign nation. We're not required to pay this, but this is a, you know, it's a compact, it's an agreement. So
federal gaming law is very complicated as well in terms of those interactions.
Right. We'll see how that all shakes out, but that is another oxygen stealer that can derail other legislation, big legislation that people are waiting for. So we'll see where that ends up. All right, so now we move on to Governor Scott and President Negron on higher education policy. Where are we at with that? We've talked about it a lot. Negron did his round robin around the state last summer. What's happening?
Well, Governor Scott, as well as, again, Senator Galvano, but he's essentially carrying Senator Negron's legislation. Both of them proposed pretty major, extensive packages last week on higher education. Again, sort of opening bids, if you will, as we go into session. Both of them, they take different tacks. The governor's focus always has been on holding down higher education costs. His package includes, for instance, allowing Bright Future scholarships to be used during summer sessions, tax exemption for textbooks. There's some other things, but it's focused, relatively narrowly focused on trying to offer higher ed at a lower cost and get kids through the system faster.
Right.
There's elements of that to the Negron/Galvano package as well, but I think the Negron-Galvano package is far more ambitious in terms of making systemic changes to the higher education system. For instance, one of the things is they want to essentially offer full rides to kids who are at the top level of Bright Futures. There's different levels in terms of academic achievement. You know, there's a price tag to all this stuff for both of their packages, and the budget's looking pretty tight for this coming year and the coming few years. So I think that's something they're going to have to work through. Galvano's bill is up in a Senate. Is supposed to be up in a Senate committee next week, so they're going to start moving fast on it. As you indicated, Senator President Negron, even before he was the president, took a tour of the state, went to all the universities, and he's made very clear that this is all a priority for him to try to move up Florida's higher education system into the next level, if you will. And part of that is students, but part of it's other systemic changes within the higher education system.
I noticed the block semester purchase.
That's
where,
one of them,
where you pay a flat fee, and you know, if you only take 9 credits in that semester, you're going to pay a higher price, but you could take up to 18 hours or 4 or 5 classes and try and speed up your graduation timing. That seems pretty a huge departure from the way colleges and universities have done it till now.
It would be a big change, but on the other hand, it does kind of go to, again, sort of the message the governor also has raised about trying to get kids through the system faster. And Negron talks, or their proposal or their sort of thrust talks about trying to measure getting kids through college in 4 years instead of, a lot of times the universities use 6 years as a measuring stick. And I don't know about you, but I want my kid to get through college as fast as I can too. So
I think they call the six-year plan the Chris Farley plan.
I don't know, but so I mean, there's also issues that Negron's raising about trying to make sure there's be competitive for really high value faculty members and those sorts of things. So, you know, it's going to be an interesting discussion. Again, I think a lot of it's going to come down in the end, at least part of it, is to how much money is available, how far is the House willing to go along with some of these changes, and you know, where we wind up through the budget process.
Well, all right, so that's what we've seen this last week with the holiday. What are we expecting to see next week? What's piquing your interest? What are you looking forward to writing?
Well, I think the higher ed thing is going to be to start the week. You know, I think that's going to be something that we next week that we're going to be watching. You know, obviously, I mean, the whole political world's going to be focused this Friday on the inauguration. So that may suck up some of the oxygen, and among Republicans, it's probably, well, Democrats too, it'll suck up their oxygen too.
If you're at an airport on Wednesday and Thursday, the good chances is if you slip and fall, there's going to be an attorney nearby flying to D.C. to give you their card. So
could be.
So we'll see. Well, that's all the time we have, Jim. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us, and we'll look forward to seeing what y'all are putting out this week, and we'll look forward to next week seeing you then. So for more news, views, and opinions, go to our website at capitoldatelineonline.com. Check us out on our Facebook page as well. And for now, have a great week.